This is Rabbi Aaron Boxt from Temple Beth Shalom in Ocala, Florida, coming once again with the um, next podcast recording. This week's Torah portion is Parshat Miketz, and in this week's Torah portion, there's a lot to digest, a lot to think about, a lot to reflect upon. But there's one piece that I want to really stick with, or stick on, or stick to, or one major theme, and that is the idea of individual responsibility to others. Um, there's a very famous line in the book of Genesis, translated into English, that says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Of course, we're referring to the story of Cain and Abel when uh, when Cain kills Abel, and when God is looking for Abel, he comes to Cain, and God comes to Cain and says, "Where is your brother?" And Cain says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And Cain's response to God is quite indifferent, but also a little misunderstanding of Cain's responsibility to his brother. Obviously, human beings are a creation of God. Therefore, God is responsible for, in Cain's vision, God is responsible for maintaining human beings and keeping them, alive and going and all those kinds of things. And obviously, anything that happens to human beings, God would, of course, should, of course, be the first to understand or know what's going on. But Cain misses a very important point. Just because Cain is not responsible for the maintaining of life of his brother Abel, that doesn't mean he doesn't have a responsibility to him. Another very famous line in the Torah, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," love your neighbor as yourself. Of course, this is the sort of the golden rule, the key point of Judaism, Christianity, Islam. I would say the majority of the world's religions is the way that we treat each other, that we love each other, treat each other with kindness and understanding. And this is the piece that Cain was missing. And this is the reason why Cain was punished. Not just because he killed his brother, but also it was in his inability to understand his role in his brother's life and his role in helping his brother to keep going, basically. And so the reason why I bring this up in reference to Parshat Miketz is because it's in this parsha that Joseph reveals to his brothers who he is. He is now, after being sold into slavery by his brothers, he is now the viceroy, or the second in command of Egypt, and he is now revealing himself to his brothers. And one of the things he says to his brothers is, "Do not blame yourselves for what happened to me, because after all, this was God's plan. Had I not been sold into slavery by you, I would not have been able to come to Egypt. I would not have been able to become second in command. I would not have been able to interpret the Pharaoh's dreams and enable us to live through the famine that's coming." But there's one really important piece to this. In the story where Joseph gets sold into slavery, originally his brothers are talking about killing him. But Judah, the oldest, Judah comes and says, "Let's not kill him. We do not want our brother's blood on our hands. In fact, let's just put him in the pit." And then he gets sold into slavery. But in this, that was a few previous Torah portions. But in this week's Torah portion, Judah is has gone through a little bit of let's say, transformation, a shift in his personality. He appears to be a changed man because Jacob instructs his sons to return to Egypt in search of food, keeping Benjamin, his youngest, with him. And eventually, Benjamin is required by, of course, Joseph, who is, before he reveals himself to his brothers, he needs to see his brother Benjamin. And this shows a very important change in Judah. Judah was frightened and, of course, anxious. But Judah promises his father, I will take care of Benjamin. Benjamin will be safe because he will be with me. And this is the same character that sold his younger brother Joseph into slavery several chapters earlier. But Judah remembered what he did to his brother Joseph. And now he's taking on the responsibility of his other younger brother Benjamin. And then later on in the same story, when Benjamin is to be imprisoned because he, quote unquote, stole the from Joseph, which actually really didn't happen because Joseph planted it. But Judah steps forward to say, "Let me take his place. Let me be the one that is imprisoned." He says, "If I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, since his own life is so bound up with his, when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. Let me not be witness to the woe that would overtake my father." Judah is now becoming his brother's keeper. Judah, who was once uncaring and callous, he becomes responsible for his younger brother. This is not something that we talk about very often. And you have to really kind of dig back into the story of Judah a little bit further to see why this change has occurred. If you've read the stories of Judah, you remember that Judah had several sons. His oldest son dies childless, and because of the levirate marriage, his second child is required to marry Tamar, who was his first son's wife. He then dies as well. Judah does not want his other son to die, and he also realizes his third son isn't old enough to be married, so he sends Tamar off to wait for his third son to be old enough to marry. And in this waiting time, he actually goes and is tricked into having an affair with Tamar, although he doesn't know that it's Tamar. And he realizes that he has such more of a responsibility to other people, not only to his children, but to his brothers. And this leads him to taking responsibility for his own actions, as in the case of his youngest brother, Benjamin. And of course, how do we know that he has empathy? Well, he's buried his two sons. Anyone who's ever lost a family member, especially a child, knows that is one of the most difficult things to experience, to go through, and that certainly would bring to anyone an empathetic ability, or ability to have empathy. So we see that Judah has gone through a change that Cain did not go through. And I would argue that Judah is not the only character in the Bible that has experienced this kind of transformation. But we see it for sure in Judah this week. I will be out for the next few weeks, so there will not be a podcast for the rest of this year until I return in January. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Hanukkah and a wonderful secular new year. Be back together in 2024.